All right, so we done waiting? It's just the two of us?
Yeah. Yeah. Just the two of us.
Wow. Just we're the only committed
Exactly.
to this podcast. I
That's
I think
right.
we need to really have a serious conversation with these other two, and
I think
and
the
we have
audience
to
should shame
you
them
know
publicly too.
ask some hard questions,
Hmm.
give some tough love, and hopefully we make it out on the other side. But, let's do this. Let's get through it.
Let's do it.
Welcome to Drunk Real Estate.
Grab a drink and enjoy the show.
Hey there, welcome to episode 56 of Drunk Real Estate. I am Kyle Wilson, Ashley Wilson's husband, and it's a little barren in the landscape right now, a little bleak, but I think we have the best of the four hosts with us. I have AJ Osborne with me, and that's it. Just me and AJ. How's it going, man?
That's right. Going good. Going really good. I think last week's episode scared them off.
Yeah, I know. That was intense, right?
Yeah. Yep. They're like, we're done. We're out.
So, where are you right now, buddy?
I'm in California. So I'm down here for meetings, and I don't know where the other two are, but traveling, still committed, and decided to be on here. So
That's what I'm talking about. Like you look like you're in the middle of nowhere, poor internet, and you're still committed. You're still doing this with us.
yeah, it's Starlink. I mean, it's basically out in the wilderness here in Newport Beach, California.
Were you able to find a Diet Coke out in the wilderness?
You know what? I had to go for the hard stuff because I was traveling. So I went with the Monster, but it's this new Rio Punch flavor. I used to live in Brazil, and I'm headed back in 2 weeks. So I'm kind of like getting ready here for the next few weeks, and thought I'd try it out. A little celebration towards Carnival. And so, yeah, that's what I'm doing. How about you, man? What do you got?
Actually, you know what? The Eagles, they're playing their home opener in Brazil. So I was like, oh, maybe I should go out there. But it's like nosebleeds are like $6,000 to get out there. So I was like, I don't know if I want to go that badly. And it's like it's kind of midweek too. And like, with the kids, it didn't really work out. Well, hey, Jay, how's it going? Oh, wait, Jay's not here. I don't know. He said he's like without cell service in the middle of nowhere on some mission or something, showing his kids what a third world country is like. So we wish him well. I guarantee Mauricio's not on something as cool as that. He probably just didn't feel like coming. So I don't think he has any excuses. So it's just the two of us. So we saw this coming. We knew what we were going to do is we were going to bring it back to the roots. Actually, back in the day, Jay and I had another podcast, and we would go out every once in a while. We'd go on the road, and we would do drunk real estate with two random people from that city live and record it. And that's kind of how the drunk real estate idea came about. We thought we would play one of those for you. At the same time, when we had planned this, a lot has kind of happened since we planned it last week, and maybe we had an interesting weekend, needless to say. Interesting Saturday, at least, going into Sunday. Yeah, there was an assassination attempt on a presidential candidate. I don't know, AJ. How are you wrapping your head around this?
It's wild. I think, like everybody, it was like kind of like, wait, what? Shocking. And then it was almost like not sure exactly how serious it was. And it just, as more and more information started to come in, then it became harder to necessarily believe what was coming in. And it was like, I think like everybody for a while, for the first few days, it was just trying to understand and take in like, what the heck, what's going on? What happened? The imagery and the pictures coming out of it have just been blasted, obviously, everywhere. They were wild photos. The guy that took that famous one of Trump with the flag, he's like an award-winning photographer, and he just took that shot was incredible. And I think that kind of made the vision, the imagery of it really brought it to life in a way that, I think is hard to even wrap your around. I think that really made it be explosive too, because of how all the footage, the video, everything else that you felt you could really be immersed. So there was so much coming out this weekend, and it was pretty shocking.
Yeah, it's I couldn't imagine if you were watching that live on TV. Obviously, people who were live at the event, they had a completely different experience. Like you're fearing for your own life as well. But I couldn't like watching that live on TV and hearing it and like going through that where like you really don't know what's going on. Like we all came in after. I assume you didn't watch it live, but like we in the hour after, like it was all over the news, and we already knew the premise that okay, like Donald Trump's fine. There was an attempt. They didn't know if it was an attempt on his life. They didn't know what happened. You're watching the video and you could tell like they're just doing abundance of caution, like trying to say, okay, we don't know this for sure. We don't want to put our foot in our mouth, but it seems like someone shot at the former president. But like just the craziness of all the news that's coming out. I'm really glad that it seems like no one has jumped to conclusions yet. There is, because this is, we're sitting on kind of a tinderbox in the country right now with both sides are very heated. It's almost like when you look back at it, it's shocking that it happened, but it really shouldn't have been that shocking to us when either side kind of acts like the other side is evil and the devil. And like, it's not necessarily that surprising in retrospect that it happened, but to say it out loud that this happened in this day and age in this country, that someone was able to pull this off, even
in our lifetime, that has never happened. Last time was 81.
I guess it's one of those things that now that he's fine and now like it worked out and everything's okay. Like you gotta say like Trump's been politically extremely lucky lately. Like even in the last couple of days, they dropped his classified documents case. They, he had that Supreme Court ruling. And if you want to talk about one of the biggest political boosts you can get is for someone to try and kill you and fail.
And the debate on top of it, the debate started this whole, it seemed like, and it's just been one after another. And then the imagery and everything, it was and two, it's interesting because I think that is what people are, the real thing is the reaction, right? That's the big thing. And that's what everybody's talking about now is the reaction, how we got here. Because you're right, after it's done and you're like, okay, he's alive. Like he didn't actually, that initial shock. We had someone that was actually killed at the event. We had two people that were injured from from the rounds it was 150 yards away.
Yeah, and it seems like the guy who passed away at the event, like it's like unfortunately it's always like someone who seems like a great person too, like good family person, was a former fire chief. Like, yeah, it's like it's just it's awful to see.
Awful. And so it's this wake of this, and two, I think it really puts to the point is we just had this debate. We've had the sequence of events. We finished the debate, things started to pull towards Trump, everything else, and then you have this assassination attempt. And I think it's an event that speaks to the broader problems that are going on. And this is something that, I was talking to you guys about prior, and, obviously a lot of people are having it, that I think there's a real problem in this country that we have, that we just take for granted certain types of language that we use and how we talk about things. And there's this narrative that has been from the top down. You have from, right now in the country, from the president himself down, saying that Trump is the greatest threat to our democracy that we've ever had. We have a president of the United States stating that the candidate that is running against him is the greatest threat to democracy that our country has ever seen. And you have people that are saying, he's Hitler. Like literally people believe this guy is Hitler and they openly say it. And it's this escalation. And it's a way, I think, because of social media, and it's a way to get hit. You're trying to get, but this escalation that you have, when you have narratives like this that is passed on from every single news organization, the president himself, to all politicians, saying that this guy here is the greatest threat to our country. He's Hitler. He's going to do all of these horrific things. And we're going to have World War III because of this person, which, by the way, was already president, and none of those things even remotely happened, not even close, right? That you're basically saying all these things that we learned about in the history books, which they say, this is a turning point in history in which all of these terrible things will happen. You're going to have people act extreme. And, it too rightfully so. If this is a real theme and narrative that you believe, if you actually believe these things, then the logical thing would be to take out Hitler, right? To take it out. And I think that we should be realizing in this country to blatantly, and you get people that say these things, but it's different when it is the actual news, the president himself, and, things carrying out these narratives that has consequences, right? And I think that it shows we've gone too extreme, and then the extreme has consequences, and people act extreme. And people that can't hear that and say, oh, I get it, you're talking about this is a political theater stuff, but they actually believe it. They really believe it. And you have a lot of people in this country that, in all countries, that are not mentally, they're not okay, right? These are people that are stressed out. These are people that feel out of control. And all it takes is a few of these people to do really bad things, and you have chaos. And people lose their lives like we saw. And I think that's what's scary. Yes, that obviously was horrific. Someone died. The president, the imagery, I don't know, did you see the 3D imageries that they were putting out that showed the pathway of the bullets? It came out today or yesterday, and it showed the 3 different rounds and the timing of when he was turning his head and stuff. It was wild that he survived.
Yeah, we're talking millimeters difference in timing. Yeah.
Our world would be so different, in that, and how lucky we all got that didn't occur. And then from that, though, you had the backlash where you have famous people to politicians to everything else upset that he didn't get shot and openly saying it would be better. We almost got there. Oh, he shouldn't have missed. And you have people that are not even upset about it. They're saying things like that. And you're going, that's the opposite of what we want. This should be a point where we come together.
Well, yeah, hopefully people take this as a bit of a wake up call that how far we've gotten and what the consequences can be, because we're in an outraged society. I've said it multiple times, and people love to be outraged. And so media feeds into that because, that's what gets clicks and that's what gets views. And, people hide behind a veil of anonymity online as well, where they could say whatever they want. So, you make comments he's Hitler and all these things because, you're saying it online and there's no consequences. And it's one of those things you said, you're right. We haven't had something like this really happen in our lifetime. There's actually, I have a list that I've went through that there were a couple kind of attempts in our lifetime. But it's nothing kind of to this extreme. And hopefully it's a bit of a wake up call that words and do have meaning. And this is where we've gotten to in our political climate right now. And that we should maybe tone down all that a little bit. Let's focus a little bit more on what the actual issues are instead of, who the people are and calling names and things like that. Let's focus a little bit on what politics used to be. It used to be we're discussing issues and where we should be heading as a country instead of who is spearheading that and what kind of person they are.
But the thing is, that didn't happen. That was the sad part for me. That didn't happen. You would have thought that it was okay, this is a national time of mourning, right? It's oh, this is horrible. We just had somebody die, was killed and everything. But that didn't really happen. And I was really surprised by that. And it was I don't think that would have happened with anybody but Trump. I think if you went back in any other president, doesn't matter who, nobody would think that it would be literally a national time of whoa, everybody, what's going on? But I mean, you had immediately after it, you had basically, it was, CNN literally hours after it blamed Trump for it. So you have outlets that are now, they blame Trump for his assassination attempt. So they immediately go back in and they're like, well, it's because of him that these bad things are happening to him. And it's like, well, shouldn't we just be like, hold on here, everybody. This is not only out of control here. This is like, you goes right back to attacking the person.
Yeah, and as of this taping too, like this isn't like your typical, like usually a shooter has like some manifesto or like some clear motive or something like that. As of this taping, correct me if I'm wrong, they still have yet to find a motive. They've yet to find him part of any fringe groups or anything. Like there's conflicting information that he was actually a registered Republican, but then he donated $15 to some Democratic group. Like it's. We talk about lucky. Like, I feel like that's a little bit lucky.
There's no social media presence at all, which is like, they have no records of him on anything.
I was scared. Honestly, I was scared when I first saw it. And like, I just saw this, like, okay, what if he's part of some fringe, liberal, diehard group that is, a national group. And like, all of a sudden, like, we're going to have this liberal group versus Proud Boys versus, like, it's going to be like, and that's just the beginning of like some sort of, ground war. And like, I'm honestly like thinking to myself, like, how quickly can I pack my shit up and get to Canada? That's literally what I was thinking. So luckily, like, that didn't have to happen. But the fact that my brain went there immediately, like, I feel like that says something as well as to where we are. And so hopefully we can, get back to a little bit of civility leading into this election. We could figure out this whole thing with Biden, whether or not he's going to run. I'd much rather talk about that, to be honest, than political violence and stuff like that. But as I said, hopefully this leads to a little bit clearer heads going forward, even if it takes a little bit of time and once the smoke clears.
Yeah, I think it's a losing proposition, I think, for either side to celebrate, to be upset that someone either didn't die or didn't happen. I think there comes a time to the vast majority of people that they're like, it's a moment of humanity. You know what I mean? Like, all of a sudden these aren't characters. These aren't. They're not characters on a screen. These are real people. Like, these are actual human beings. These are real people. And we all need to remember that.
I did see an interesting piece, though, where it kind of talked about like the difference, or like, what is the difference in, like, people have been trying to ruin his life, put him in jail for the rest of his life, like, take all his money, like, basically ruin him as a person. Like, is there really a big difference? Like, and it's an interesting thought where you're like, okay, yeah, a loss of life is obviously a loss of life, and that's the extreme. That's the highest level that you can get to. But how far below the highest level have we already put him through?
Yeah. There's nothing that Trump hasn't gotten thrown at him at this point. They've tried to impeach him for things that were literally made up, like the Russian hoax. They've tried to go after him they went after him civilly. They went after him politically. They tried to jail him. The court system literally adjusted what they were doing and everything to try to go after him. And I mean, there's nothing that they have, like, everything when you look at Trump is unprecedented in the opposition that he is faced. And what they're doing is they're kind of making him a hero. Like, you see these pictures, you're making him a hero.
And I was just going to say that if you want to talk about Trump's legacy as a person, like, this is, in my opinion, this is the best thing that could have happened. Like, it's cemented his legacy. It plays into, like, he's been doing the whole, like, oh, I've been targeted politically, persecuted, all these things, like that whole story that he's got. This just lends more credence to it.
And two, it's how he bounces back from it. So it's like this idea that, it lent to the story and the imagery of Trump, and then it backs this imagery of Trump to people. And I think the best thing that could have ever happened to him, because I think this probably united the Republican Party completely. Like, they just came together right when the Democratic Party is being split.
It also allowed him to pick his preferred guy for VP, right? Like we were all that just happened. That's another thing that news, and we were all wondering who apparently he left it to like literally 20 minutes before he told them. But it's I believe he was trying, like they were probably in his ear. There was some picks that were probably better for him politically, that he could gain some fringe voters by bringing on somebody on as a VP. But I feel like this little boost and this boost of confidence that this gave him allowed him to kind of go with his guy and go with, like, he sees him as like the next generation of MAGA, of Trump light, and to carry on his legacy kind of after he goes. So like that I feel like that was probably an impact on it as well. So it's been a considering that the guy missed, it's been a pretty good month for Donald Trump.
Yeah. I mean, and what's happened with the Republican Party between Israel and Gaza, then after the debate calling for their presidential candidate to leave and their presidential candidate saying no. And then all of a sudden Trump reunites the Republican Party and ends up having this huge heroic moment. All of a sudden you're going, geez, this has like been a month, the best month Trump could have ever asked for. And as far as the Democratic Party, this is the worst. They're completely divided now when supporting Biden or not. And the Republicans are unified in their message. And then when you get an imagery like that, when you have somebody, it makes it way harder to attack them, right? Like it's all of a sudden now, how do you give an assault on this person when you already had a Biden who was looked and perceived as weak, incoherent? That's why his own party was asking him to step down. So they were already debating that. And then you have this happen. I wonder if this will actually make Biden step down. I wonder if this will actually make Biden say, yep, I'm done. I'm out. I mean, things change quick, but
like Trump's almost like a protected class right now, which is hilarious when you think about it. Like liberals all about like, these days is about like you don't say anything against these like protected classes. Like who's the current protected? He's almost like a protected class right now. Like you can't insult him too much because the guy just almost died. So it's like it's a tough one.
And it's like too, all of a sudden you're like, this guy's gotten everything thrown at him. Like there's nothing you can do anymore to him. It's whereas you have the totally opposite story on the other side. And I think you're right. I think it was probably the best thing, unfortunately, because it is so sad. I mean, the person that lost their life, everything, it's horrific. You can't even imagine being like, yeah, I'm going to go support my political candidate. And then you have a family member, you have somebody that got shot and killed and then injured because they were sitting at a political rally and there's snipers shooting at them. Horrific, right? And so
and if it just side note on that too, like if you're listening and you feel the same we do, there is a GoFundMe out there for the family of the gentleman, I forget his name, but who lost his life there. So go check that out, because obviously that was extremely unfortunate what happened to him. Yeah.
And so it's like it was. I think it'll be a point that everybody looks back, and this will be a dividing point. But I think you're right. I agree with what you said. It's a series of events. It's not even just this. As far as politically speaking, there's been a series of events that I'd say would lead. It was almost a reemergence for Trump, right? And
he's had zero bad news in the last month. Like zero bad things happened to him. Like,
yeah, just one after another good. And I think that leaves a lot of questions for the Democrats. What do we do here?
Which is it's a good political discussion though as well. How divisive the country is right now, or divided, I guess is a better word. When you say like everything that's happened in Trump's favor, it still hasn't moved. Like if you look at the polls, like they move, but like it still hasn't moved that crazy. Like previously, like if you look at previous assassination attempts and stuff, like they've moved polls by like 20% and like crazy numbers. And it moves like, like Biden's debate, like it moves the polls like 1% each way. Like it's like the assassination attempt, like 1%. Like it's not like they're still very like Trump has his people, and anti-Trump, I guess I would call it. It's not necessarily even Biden right now. So it's like Trump, anti-Trump, and you've kind of already decided at this point.
Trump derangement syndrome is a real thing. Like seriously, Trump derangement syndrome is like the most interesting thing to me, because I'm like, first of all, as a person that is not a Trumper, so I didn't support him. He wasn't my Republican candidate. He hasn't been. I have other ones that I liked above him. I like other Democrats above him, right? And so he wasn't. But like, I not liking a lot of personal things about Trump at all. It doesn't represent my values and things like that. But the extremism of people and how they've created Trump in their mind is really interesting, right? Like, he's become a caricature of like evilness, and like it's like derangement, right? They're totally deranged in the way that they think. Like, it's like the idea that Obama was this, spy that wasn't even a real American that came in and he had a fake passport, everything else like that, and it's a sham. Like, it was so like got so made up in some of these people's minds.
You know who started that too, right?
Oh.
That Obama's not that wasn't born in America. Wasn't that Trump who was like, show the passport?
It was before that. That was like right when he came out. Like, people started saying that like immediately, and it was like, what? I don't even know why.
But it was Trump that was like, he's like, I need to see the birth certificate. I need to, like, he put like money on it, didn't he?
Yeah, he took that and ran with it. Yeah, he was like, and I guess this happens politically, everything else, but it seems like though with Obama, there was this small group of people that had Obama derangement syndrome, where they believed mass conspiracy theories about him, right? And that were clearly so either over-exaggerated or just not true. It was strange, right? It was like, what are you guys talking about? Well, it seems like the same thing happened with Trump.
But at the same time, like you say that though, like I think that's a good example, because was it during Obama, that whole Pizzagate thing, where literally the guy armed up, full tactical gear, weapons, and broke into that pizza shop because he believed that the Democrats were like running a sex ring in there, and like he was going to be the one to save all these people.
Children, they were trafficking. He believed they were trafficking children through a pizza shop. That was exactly, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, it's like it becomes so much of this thing, and it's wild. But I think the difference with Trump is the amount. Like, I mean, you have huge people that are clearly lost. I mean, there was a great thing. We'll have to show a report on how many out of all the presidents, how many articles had to be redacted about Trump. And it was crazy. In Trump's first year, he had more articles that had to be redacted than any other president in their entire tenure, because so many things that were put out weren't true, and they had to redact it. And from the news articles, everything else. But yet the American population, they actually still believe those things. So if you look at like surveys and what they think, Trump either said or didn't say, because that was how his plastered property, they actually believe those things. And so it seems like there's this Trump derangement syndrome that is huge. And I think because of that, it's so spread apart, because you have on the Republican side who thinks he's chosen by God now, right? They're like, boom. And then you have on the other side that it's completely opposite. I don't think the polls are going to ever move that much, because there's not a lot of people that are undecided about it. But I think what will happen, though, that is pushing it over the edge is it united the party. That's the difference. The party is not confused on Trump anymore. There's nobody debating Trump. There's nobody even in the Republican Party that won't stand by Trump. They're united now. It's done. And those little things in a national thing, those end up mattering a lot when you vote, right? Like, that's the difference of people saying, I'm going to support this guy because I believe that he's a hero. I'm actually going to go to the poll and vote now because I'm all built up about him. I'm excited about him, versus not being excited about a candidate. When you're not excited about a candidate like Hillary Clinton, nobody was excited about Hillary. Nobody really liked her. There wasn't really a reason to go out and vote for her, right? And so she just had such low numbers of voting. She didn't excite anybody. Like, nobody was like, we love her, right? And Trump just swept the floor with her. You get people excited.
Well, that was the rhetoric post after that election, right? That the reason that Hillary lost, because she was, like, if you remember, she was way ahead in the polls. When I say way ahead, she was.
Oh yeah, the polls were. Every poll had like she was going to sweep.
Yeah, with a significant lead, and that people just didn't go. They didn't show up to vote because they weren't excited about her, and they believed, oh, she's just going to win, and like we're and you know that's kind of how. And so the people now that are saying,
and people
okay,
were excited about Trump, and so they just showed up.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's like you get people to show up, and that's the difference. So this event, right, I think unified the party on the Republicans, fragmented the Democrats that was already weak. And that right there could be the difference. And it could, like, we could look back on this event and say that, you know, in a year and be like, that everybody's like, nope, that was the point after that point. So it's going to be fascinating to see now how he uses this momentum, what happens with Biden if he stays in the race or if he doesn't, and if this actually really significantly moves the needle. And it was such an unprecedented thing. It was because it gets publicity just because of the fact that it happened, right? That's the thing. This is all free publicity, massive free publicity. You can't pay for that kind of stuff. I think you're right. It's like the best thing that could have ever happened for Trump.
Well, he's built his entire life on that, right? Like he wants people to say his name. He puts his name everywhere, and he just wants it to be on someone's tongue anywhere they go. And he's done a good job. Like he's made an entire brand around it. And then like when he says, like, and people laugh when they're going through his net worth, and he puts a value on his name and his brand. And people are like, "Oh, you can't do that." Like you can, though. Like it's worth a lot of money, just that brand.
I mean, think about the news coverage. It's free publicity. We're talking. This is not cheap. You know, the amount of publicity that he got from this. How many podcasts now are we all talking about this? Every podcast is not talking about this. News on. You know, you have Twitter, every social network. It's just him. The only big publicity that Biden's got was for the worst possible reasons. And it wasn't, I'd even say publicity, it was just everybody going, he needs to leave. That's why everybody's saying his name. It's fighting in the Democratic Party because he's got to go because he doesn't know where he's at. And so you have these two narratives, and to me, it seems like a big shift in the country. We'll see. We'll see when the polls come out and everything else, but it was like, I mean, this was a big shift.
Yeah, they're running out of time. If they do want Biden to step down, he hasn't said anything other than he is staying in the race. And you know, it's one of those things where we've seen it in previous years where you go into an election and one party kind of sees the writing on the wall that they might lose, and they shift their funds and the money that they're putting towards into kind of more state level stuff and try to say like, hey, like if Trump wins, we need to kind of have all those seats to counteract him, which I'm not mad about. I think we should always have kind of a split House Senate. It's, you know, it doesn't, not a lot gets done, but the way both parties are right now, I'm kind of scared as to if somebody got a majority in both. So, you know, if that works out, then not going to be too mad. And, you know, Biden's making it tough, especially for real estate investing Democrats right now. You know, he just came out with he wants to cap 5% rents.
And I got to ask you about this because I'm not following this obviously like you and Jay is. I saw the stuff. Like my first question, the thing is that we're talking about is he's saying that he's going to cap rents at 5%, and if somebody gives rents over 5%, they're going to lose like their tax advantages. So is this real? Like, is this something he can really do? Can he actually do that? Can he execute on that? I really haven't read this much into it.
To me, it's just it's a political game. It's the same as like, I don't even like talking about this, but the problem is people want to hear it. Because it's never going to happen. It's the same thing every time there's a new tax package comes out, there's a new whatever, and there's a million things in the tax package, and that gets whittled down to 3 things. Like it's there, and it's always like, oh, 1031's going away. oh, like it's always something that is everyone's going to be once again outraged that, oh my God, you can't take that from us. And they don't. Like, it's like rich people invest in real estate. Rich people on both sides, Republicans and Democrats. So first of all, this has to go through the normal process. If he wanted, he could propose it and he could say, I want to get this done. This still has to go through the House and Senate. So as long as the Republicans hold one of those, it's not passing. That's first of all. And second, like when it came down to it, I don't even think the Democrats would want to pass this because the Democrats probably invest in real estate as well. So it's like it's one of those things where I feel like it's just political theater to say like, you know, he's trying to throw out things that he thinks is going to rally the troops and get young people to come out and vote for him.
Especially after this big thing with Trump, it was interesting timing. It's like right after that, we're going to cap rents, so rents are going to come, and it's like,
Yeah, it seems like a bit of a theme where like I feel like he thinks his path to winning is to get young people to come out to vote. Like that's his only path because he knows like he's kind of lost the older generation. And it's so like his path is, okay, what's the issues that young people care about right now? And what young people care about is they can't afford to live. So, okay, what am I going to do? But like, even like the proposal is like capping it at 5%, like, so, and they quote like, oh, over the last 3 years, rents have gone up by 20% over the last 3 years. And I'm like, okay, well, if you're capping it at 5%, when you do the math, like that's still, even if it went up the max, that's still 16%. You know, like it's not that far off of 20. It didn't go like, and this is the extreme example, right? This is when we had, you know, crazy government spending and stimmy checks and all this stuff. That's the reason,
inflation was wild.
Right. That's the reason they went up so high. And like, it still only went up 20%, and your cap wouldn't even really do much on that. And they did have, you know, luckily they did have a bit of a caveat when he threw on there. They thought about it a little bit where they're like, okay, there's, if it's a new construction or if it's heavy renovations or stuff like that. So obviously they would have to get into the details on that. But like, still, like it just seems like one of those political theater things. We know it's never going to pass. It's not even going to, I'd be surprised if he even ever gets drawn up. It's just one of those things he's throwing out to try and rally the young people to say, oh yeah, we need Biden in here because he's going to help us pay our bills. You know, he's going to help us pay our student debt. He's going to help us pay for rent. He's going to help us pay for this. You know, he's going to help us. He's going to help us. He's going to help us. And, you know, I don't think any of it's actually going to come to fruition.
Okay, good. Because I saw it and I was like, oh, I didn't know exactly the path or anything to it, but I thought that's wild. Like, could you imagine what would happen in real estate if they did that?
I can, because like it's happened. Like there's certain spots, you know, New York City, there's certain places in California, they have rent control and it does not go well. And then like, it's like, we've talked about it in previous episodes. We don't have to get too much into it.
They cut off supply. You don't get supply. So demand goes up. And so it's an even worse problem.
It's bad all around. Like it's one of those like short-term solutions that people think like, oh yeah, like it's going to be great. But like, just, you gotta follow the money, and you gotta say, okay, first of all, if it's nationwide, that's different. But like, if it's like a place like New York, like people are just going to stop investing there, right? Like they're going to put their money elsewhere, and it's the same thing with like real estate in general. If it's nationwide, people are going to put their money in other asset classes. So what's going to happen? It's going to reduce supply of real estate, right? Because less people are going to be investing in it. Not only that, if I have current real estate, like my incentive to like keep up with my property and to like really like make it a great experience for tenants, what's my incentive? I can't raise rents on them. So like, I'm just going to kind of just do the bare minimum for habitability and to make sure when I have my inspections that it's habitable. But I'm not going to improve units. I'm not going to like, you know, if I have to do a significant renovation in order to get more than 5%, like all of a sudden doing small upgrades to units, it's not worth it to me because I can't bump rents on it. So like these properties are it's going to look like Russia. When I lived in Russia, every single apartment building looked like it was built in the 80s. There wasn't a single apartment building that looked like it was new. It was kind of like one of those booms, like they built them all at once and then they were all the same. And like there was no like, I shouldn't say that. No, there's obviously, there's the 1% in Russia. The divide is much more stark in Russia, but like there was 99% of the apartment buildings, like they just had like your B minus C plus finishes. Like that's kind of it. And that's what we would have. We would end up having that. And so once again, now I'm getting into it. Like we don't need to discuss it because it's never going to happen. It's not going to pass. It's one of those, real estate.
Supply is the only thing you can do. You want to drop rents, supply is the only answer. If our nation is growing and people are going in, if you do not add supply, you will not be able to affect demand. More people fighting, willing to pay more, to do anything more to get that house that they want, to get the thing. Without supply, we're not going to take care of the problem.
Right. But it's, you can understand it a bit because it's a tough spot as a administration, just because the way you boost supply is you make it more lucrative for people to build, right? And if you make it more lucrative for people to build, then it looks like you're giving breaks to the rich people. And so it's kind of this like, okay, how do I walk that tightrope of, this would solve the problem, but politically it's not good optics in order to give, incentives to people who are already well off. So it's, yeah, in my opinion, the programs like LIHTC, they just got to do a better job of that. Like the low income housing tax credits and stuff. Like it's like, because it's so beneficial to the public that you can kind of overlook how much money the developers are making. The problem is it's just a mess. That whole program's a mess. Like it's state fund, or it's a federal funding that's administered at the state level. Each state has different rules. It's not like you're given actual money to complete these projects. What you're doing is giving, like, it's so convoluted. You're given tax credits, and then you have to sell those tax credits on the open market to other people in order to get the money. It's such a weird process. And like if they could just make better programs like that, then to me, that's the path to getting more supply and making things more affordable. But there's a lot of other issues going on right now. So where do you start? And where do you focus?
You look at Texas, how easy and cheap it is to build houses in Texas. Well,
especially in the no zoning areas, right? Like places like Houston have no zoning. Like you could literally like say, hey, like this would be a great spot for an apartment complex. And if you can buy up the land, you buy up a few single family lots all in a row, and you can put up apartment complex if you want. Like there's no like zoning restrictions on it. So that's
and so guess what happens in Texas? The income to home is like one of the best ratios in the nation. They have like the best spread from income to that cost of housing. It's like wild, especially for the population size they have. Like Texas is huge. If you go to any comparable state that has populations at that level, holy cow, it's wild, the discrepancy in income to housing cost. And it's like, Texas makes it easy to build. They make it easy to build, cheap. There's not a lot of red tape, cut through. You don't have holding costs, on and on and on and on. So people build. And two, it's not, people are like, well, if you do that, they're going to build horrible, crappy products. They don't. People flock to Texas. They have beautiful neighborhoods. They have beautiful housing. They don't look crappy. The builders aren't building crappy units that are having problems, things like that, right? That's not happening. And
in general, the cost of these houses are much cheaper in Texas. Like you, I don't know, if you go on Instagram and you look at houses in Texas, there's always these like mansions, and they're like, $350,000, and you're like, what? Like that's a $3 million house in my area. Oh.
Yeah, but $10 million house in California or more. Like it's wild. And it's because, once again, inventory. And it won't solve it. But I'm glad to hear that that's not a real thing or threat.
Well, so obviously, because and most people who are going to be listening to this are in the real estate sphere. So with all the algorithms these days, and what gets pushed to your news feeds and what gets pushed to your YouTube and all this stuff, it's going to be real estate news. And so anybody who's going to talk about this, it's going to be real estate news, and it's going to pop up. So it's going to seem like it's everywhere to us. But I think in the general public, this isn't really something that's on the map that much, especially with everything that's going on right now. We're right in the middle of the Republican National Convention as we're taping. We just had an assassination attempt. Trump just got his VP pick. No one's really paying attention to random things that Biden's proposing. So I don't think it's even going to move the needle. And I think he's going to throw it out there, and he's not going to get any, good feedback from it or anything. It's just going to die itself even before he even proposes it again. So I'm not too worried about it. Guess what I'm saying.
Good.
Cool, man. Somehow we stretched this into 45 minutes anyway. So this is kind of like a full episode. So I'm going to call an audible here. We're going to have to figure out how to do a new graphic for this. So we might have some generic graphic up on it because we already had a graphic prepared to play our previous episode. But I feel like this was a good discussion that we'll just leave it as it is. We'll leave it as a mini episode that was 45 minutes long. You know what? I'm even going to quickly pull up a top 10.
Now we're talking, and I support you, Mauricio. That's right. I support Kyle in his top 10.
And the reason I quickly looked at it while we were talking, I'm like, this is going long. I got to find a top 10. And I'm going to go through previous assassination attempts because there's about 10. Like it's not, I think there's, depending on whether you count just presidents or presidential candidates. But I'm going to go through them because you can go all the way back to obviously 1865. We're going to start there with Abe Lincoln, one of the most famous assassinations ever. John Wilkes Booth. And then that's kind of one of the original conspiracy theories things, right? He was found 12 days later, hiding in a barn, shot dead. How did this happen? It's convenient. But then a lot of these I didn't even know. I'm going to blame it on the fact that I'm Canadian and I didn't grow up taking intense American history, but they were news to me. So apparently James Garfield, 1881, shot while walking at a train station in DC 6 months after taking office. Died a few weeks later. McKinley, 1901, shot point blank range after giving a speech in New York. They thought he was going to recover, but back then, obviously, bullet wounds and medical advances weren't quite there, and he had gangrene set in, and he didn't make it. Then Roosevelt was a candidate at the time, so he wasn't the sitting president, but he survived it. And fun fact that I found out there, they never removed the bullet. The bullet stayed in his chest the rest of his life. And then, so that was Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt. So there's actually a little bit of a theme here with families, because then Franklin Roosevelt, target of assassination attempt in Miami. And he was unharmed, but the mayor of Chicago was killed in the attack. And then we, of course, have John F. Kennedy, 1963. Everyone knows what happened there. And then followed up by Robert Kennedy, who was the candidate for the president in 1968, younger brother to John F. Kennedy. Right after he gave his speech, he was shot dead. Killer was arrested, sentenced to death. He actually, fun fact on that one, he petitioned for release in 2023 and was denied. So that's happened in 1968. I'm surprised the guy's still alive.
I didn't even know he's alive. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah. 1972, George Wallace was a candidate. He was shot during a campaign stop in Maryland, shot 4 times, survived, but he was paralyzed because one of the bullets hit his spine. And actually his shooter was released in 2007. So there's an interesting one. Gerald Ford escaped 2 assassination attempts within 17 days. The guy was a gangster, apparently. Both of them received life sentences. Ronald Reagan, 1981. He was shot by, obviously, John Hinckley Jr. Pierced his lung, but there you go. Survived. And so these were some fun ones here, where this is, those were all pretty intense assassination attempts. Like people were shot, like point blank, whatever. So apparently Bill Clinton, they classify this as an assassination attempt, but there was a guy who showed up to the outside of the White House and with an automatic rifle and just unloaded an entire clip on the Oval Office. So it's debatable how much of an assassination attempt that was just on Bill Clinton, or if it was just somebody who was mad.
right? Yeah, Clinton. I don't even
Yeah,
think
so
Clinton was there.
Like, I don't remember the story fully, but I don't know if I classify that an attempt just on Bill Clinton. But he did shoot at the White House, so I guess that's. And then there was another one, George Bush. So he was in Georgia, the country, not the state, and a man threw a hand grenade towards the podium. The hand grenade didn't explode, and no one was hurt. But I thought it was pretty intense. All of these other assassination attempts with guns. This guy just went all in with hand grenade. Anyway, but that was the last technical attempt, was 2005. That happened in Georgia. Bill Clinton, I don't know if you really classify that one. So if you want to go back to the real, I'm going to call it the real assassination attempt. The last one was 1981. So it has been a while. Anyway, there's a longer than usual top 10. But
it's amazing to think of all the assassination attempts, and it's amazing to think of like how, really since 81 though, there hasn't been a real one, right? And definitely none that was hit. And that was a wild thing, seeing those 3D reports of the bullets coming by and how close it was, like how he turned his head and even had to tilt it. Like it just, the first bullet, how it pierced that went through, and then the next ones that followed it up. It was,
and we're still getting details out, because I'd hesitate to talk about details about, like, there's the report that the one cop actually went up the ladder right before the shooting, saw the guy, had to duck down, and then it happened right after. There's a lot of reports coming out, so I hesitate to go through it.
Conspiracy theories like crazy. The left, it was wild. I sent you guys that thing. It was like across the board. They're like totally fake. It was staged by Trump. And I was like, somebody died. Yeah. And it was the number one trend.
Wrestling style, where the guy goes down as the razor blade in his mouth, and then or in his shorts, and he pulls it out and he cuts his ear.
And then comes up and like, you're like, I can't believe it. And that was like, you had huge people like that were like, this looks staged, everything else. It was the number one trending, staged was the number one trending thing. And you're going, really? Like, wow.
Well, because I guess that comes from, it does really, like, how well he made out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I almost feel
it's like, how could he have?
Right. Like, I almost feel like he had been trained, and to the point where they were like, hey, if there's ever like some sort of assassination attempt on your life, like, this is how you should react. Like, this is what you should do. Because it was like, after the initial like shock of what happened, like, he was like, okay, like, it was almost like, I have a job to do. Like, I have to do this. I have to, like, it's like and some, as you said, some of those photos, like, people are already getting tattoos of it, right? Like, it's like,
oh yeah, dude, those photos were incredible. Like, you're going, that's iconic. And so you're right. That was like the best thing that could have ever happened. So very unfortunate.
All right. Since this is a kind of a real episode, you want to plug anything?
Yeah. You know what? It's been plugging the book every single time, but I'm going to do that. Plug the AJ Osborne podcast, though. We had our reboot. So go over and check that out, guys. Just AJ Osborne, type it in, podcast, and it'll come up. So along with this one.
Yeah, I keep the book next to me just in case.
Yeah, just in case we bring it up, because you're a true supporter.
Exactly. I'm going to, as always, I'm going to plug my wife, Badash Investor, at Badash Investor on Instagram. Check her out on YouTube, Badash Investor. All the fun stuff that she's got going on. A little insight into her life too. Some cool stuff and vacations and things like that. So go check it out. That's it for me. I don't know. I got nothing else, man. Good little impromptu episode there. I liked it.
Yeah. They missed it, everybody, and you can let us know in the comments and everything how much better it is. Like, is it twice as good without the other two, or is it only like 50% better, or is it way like 300% better without the other two? So yeah, let us know which one.
I do have to say, AJ, like, I feel like you're the only person that I can hang out with who is like dead sober and we still vibe and have great conversations. Usually if it's a one-on-one thing with somebody, I have to have a few drinks in me. So it's I appreciate you hanging out, man.
Well, I appreciate it too, and that's a great compliment. So I'm taking it.
All right. Well, hopefully we have the whole gang back next week. AJ and I are gonna jump off, stop the recording. We're gonna have a hard conversation on how we're gonna handle this. But yeah, so hopefully the gang is all back. These guys accept their flaws and promise to do better next week. So if that happens,
yep. Repentance is real. They can do it.
Yep. If that comes to fruition, then I will see you next Tuesday.
See you.